We're back here, whole 9 yards on a Monday afternoon. We're just going to get straight into NBA stuff. So I guess we'll start out with AD. The Lakers have now lost 2 in a row. AD looks to be out for another...
Basically a month.
Yeah. I guess, how does this change the West? Do you still view the Lakers as the favorites in the West or in the league in general without AD, or at least with a hampered AD? For me, in terms of being favorites in the West, I still think they're my favorites. I still anticipate AD coming back healthy. If he's healthy, even if he's 80%, I still view this team as the favorites. Anything less than that, I would say the Clippers are my favorites to win the West and probably the finals. Whatever team comes out of the West is going to be my favorites, whether it is the Lakers or the Clippers. I don't think anybody else is going to. Assuming it's one of those, I would have those as that team as my favorite to win the finals. But I still, if you made me bet which team makes the finals today out of the West, I'm still going to go with the Lakers.
Yeah, I probably would too. Even with like an 80% AD, I think anything below 80%, it could be the Clippers. But the problem with the Clippers is that it's really just George and Kawhi. They don't really have anyone else that could do anything, or at least like someone that can be an impactful player that can get you late buckets in a game or in a playoff series. They can hit those clutch shots that you need that from your role players. Lou Williams has been terrible in the postseason for the last basically his whole career. He's never been a good postseason player. Ibaka's not he's not that type of player that he was with like the Thunder to be able to still be that guy. He's probably like a fourth or fifth guy, not like a third guy who's a go-to guy. Do
you think the Lakers have one of those role players, or do they not need one of those? Or?
Well, I think LeBron and AD they're clearly better than George and Kawhi. So I'm banking on the fact that one of them can hit a shot, or if someone does need to, then it's going to be Kuzma or Schroeder that's going to have to do it. And I have more faith in Schroeder or Kuzma to do it than Lou Williams or Patrick Beverley or Serge Ibaka or Marcus Morris. Even though he has hit big shots with the Celtics, it doesn't seem like he's a guy, if you give him the ball in the late situation, he's going to shoot the ball, which I don't know if you necessarily want in a late game situation like that. I think I'd rather have Kawhi and Paul George taking that shot. So unless they make a move to get someone or someone steps up, then it's going to be hard for them, even with an 80% AD, for them to beat the Lakers, I would say.
Do you give them any shot against the Clippers without AD or no?
What, the Lakers?
Yeah.
Against the Clippers without AD, yeah, I would say they'd probably lose just because I don't think he's not good enough to carry this whole team by himself. Like, Schroeder would have to average like 25 points per game in that series. And I just don't know if he could. Or Harrell would have to be like, 22 points. I just don't think that could happen.
Yeah, I would give them like a 5% chance of winning that series, even if that, honestly. I would pick the Clippers in a heartbeat without AD. But I think there's no reason for me not to believe AD won't come back super healthy, ready to go for the playoffs at least. I mean, he's going to be back, he'll be back for a solid amount of games in the regular season. I'm not concerned about it if I was a Lakers fan. They're still my favorites to win the West, and honestly, they're my favorite to beat whoever comes out of the East, which we'll talk about right now. The Nets, they're winning without KD. They're winning in general. They just beat
Clippers.
The Clippers. Are they your clear-cut number one out of the East or in general?
Out of the East, definitely. Looking at the standings, they're 20-12 right now, and they've missed KD for the last 4 games. KD, Harden, and Kyrie have only played like 4 games together, whatever it is. Philly's 20-11. I think they're way better than Philly is. I think if they were going a series, I think Embiid could probably average 35 points, and they'd still win in 5 or 6 games. Probably 6 games, but they could win in 5 because you can't stop them offensively. You can't score enough points to outscore them. They're going to put up 130 almost every single game. And no matter how bad their defense is, if they were playing Philadelphia and Embiid's giving you 35 every single game, who else is scoring on that team that's going to outscore Harden, Kyrie, and KD?
Well, nobody. Not even. I guess Embiid would technically do that, but Tobias Harris would have to play. He'd have to go for, again, you'd have to be a 25-point-per-game scorer on, you'd have to be very efficient. Simmons would have to play out of his mind as well. I don't think the Sixers would win. I do see a path for them. I think, they have to have their best series of, their, generation, their trust the process era. Embiid would have to play like by far the best player in that series. He'd have to be dominant. He'd have to be an MVP. He'd have to be more than an MVP type caliber player. He'd have to be like the MVP. Like, he'd have to play better than he's probably playing right now. And right now he's on pace to probably win an MVP, or him or LeBron.
But I mean, even that, I just don't see how they could win a series against the Nets.
Because the Nets' defense is horrible. If you think about it individually, like, is Embiid? They don't have 3 offensive players nearly as good as the 3 on the Nets. But if the Nets are still going to be the 25th best defense in the league, I think that's what they are right now. If they're still going to be the 25th best defense in the league, I don't really. I mean, I still give them a shot, and I still pick them over the Sixers, but. I mean, I don't have the Nets as a favorite over the Lakers or the Clippers. They'd have to be, again, like, it's so tough to win a finals or even get to the finals without having at least like a mediocre defense.
I think as long as they're at like 20 defensive rating, I think they're fine. I think 25 is too low, but I think if they get to 20, they're fine. Because I think against like a center like Embiid, they have no one to guard him. DeAndre Jordan can't guard him. If you try to go small, Jeff Green, he can't guard him. So they'll have trouble with the center, but against anyone else, I mean, you can just throw guys at people. They're still going to get 25 to 30 points against a really good scorer. But as long as like multiple people aren't killing you, it's not. I don't think the defense matters as much, especially when you can easily outscore every single team that you play, and it's not even a problem because in a Sixer series you'll have Simmons to guard one of the 3. I don't know which 3 you'd put him on, but there's 2 other guys that no one else can really guard. So whoever you choose to put Simmons on, who's probably the best defender in the league, at least perimeter defense. Who else can you put on Kyrie and KD or Harden and KD or Harden and Kyrie? You can't guard all 3 of them.
I mean, is it going to matter if you have the 25th best defense in the league? I'm not sure. I would still I still have the Nets. I mean, they're still going to be at least right now, my favorites to win the East. I'm not a huge believer in the Sixers, honestly. The Celtics haven't looked good. The Bucks, I'm not a huge believer in the Bucks. They could literally go 73-9, 74-8, and I still wouldn't pick them to come out of the East. Probably, I probably still wouldn't.
Well, they're 18-13 right now, so
not that they're 74.
Yeah.
But. Or I guess they can't even do that in a 72-game regular season, but I'm not a believer of Budenholzer in the playoffs, even back with the Hawks. Not that Hawks team was people weren't anticipating that Hawks team to beat LeBron and the Cavs, but I mean they got demolished. They just embarrassed in the playoffs. Budenholzer has just never been a good coach to me, or at least not an elite coach, like even on a Stevens level. But I guess we'll talk about this Celtics and Stevens right now.
Yeah.
They just look horrible. They just choked a 24-point lead against the Pelicans yesterday. The game went into overtime. Tatum looked all right. I mean, Tatum was hitting shots. He hit like a tough floater at the end to send the game into OT. But I mean, to me, I just don't know with the Celtics team. I almost feel like it has to be something mental in the locker room. Like you just don't. Well, you're not surrendering 24-point leads to the Pelicans out of all people, like on the daily, and I'm selling. I mean, I'm officially sold on the Celtics now. I'm selling all my stock on the Celtics.
Well,
not that it's valuable. But.
Do you think the problem is that Marcus Smart is injured?
No, I don't.
For the locker room, for the team, for everything.
I don't think Marcus Smart necessarily contributes to a healthy locker room because. He basically last year he feuded with Tatum and Brown, and I'm not sure what's going on now, but it can't be. There's no way that Marcus Smart is the reason that this is happening. I don't think he's not the Tom Brady or like the Kevin Garnett or whatever to this Celtics team. He just isn't. I'm not sure. I don't think you have it, and I don't know that it's necessary because. I mean, we've seen NBA teams. I mean, LeBron. I don't think LeBron is like a Tom Brady, like where he like holds the locker room together and stuff like that. I think LeBron can be very, selfish and stuff like that or whatever. I'm not too sure. I don't know who you would want to bring in to help this Celtics team. I'm not sure if you can. I think you might just have to let it play out for the year and reassess in the offseason. To me, I'm not I love Smart for sure. He's one of my favorite players on the team, but I'm looking to trade Smart. I would be willing to trade anybody except for Tatum and Brown, because I still think the reality is, if this were to happen again next season, after that season, I mean, if I was Tatum and Brown, I would not be happy in my situation.
Yeah,
and I think that's your worst case situation, because even if you're able to control Tatum and Brown for however many years, if they're not happy, they're not happy, and you're just not going to win. Like, it's just the reality of it, at least in my mind.
Yeah, and it most likely won't get that much better because you still have Kemba. He's untradeable. It looks like he's not going to be back to anywhere close to what he was just 2 years ago.
He did have a good game against.
Well, he had a good game against Atlanta and Washington, which they won one of those. They lost against Washington, but those are two of the worst defensive teams in the league. So I can't, and he was getting guarded by Trae Young in the Atlanta game. So you can't really look too much into it. I mean, in the Pelicans game, he was 5 of 21, 1 from 12 for 3, and he had a chance to tie I don't know if it was to tie or take the lead. It was right at the end, I think in overtime. I'm surprised they even went to him. Honestly, I don't know why they wouldn't go to Tatum or Brown, but he missed. I don't think I was watching. I don't think anyone was thinking that shot was going in.
The Tatum shot?
No, the Kemba 3. It was near the end of OT.
Yeah.
Like, no one thought
I
that
know
shot
exactly
was going
what
in.
shot you're talking about.
Yeah, it was. I'll try to look it, but
it was one that hit the right side of the rim, right?
Yeah, it was. I'm looking at it. Maybe it was at the end of regulation. Maybe it was. No, 24 seconds left. Brandon Ingram just made a 3 to make it 115-112, and then Kemba took a 3 that missed. And then, if you make that shot, it's a tie game. So I don't know. I just think that Kemba, I don't know what the problem with them is. It's something that Stevens can't figure out.
I still look at Stevens too, and I ultimately think, I'm not too sure about Stevens at this point. I'm not going to fire him or anything. I don't think he's on the hot seat until at least after this year. But I clearly think he's got something wrong with being able to manage a locker room. If you look at past years again with Kyrie, and I know nobody can manage Kyrie, but still, if you look at the history of these Celtics teams, something always goes wrong. Unless, again, like your best 3 players go out and you're working with like what Stevens had in Butler, which is like a bunch of, not bums, but people that are either rookies or, not in their primes, not big egos, that are even just lucky and happy and grateful to be in the NBA. That's the time when he has done best. He's done best with the least amount of talent, basically, on the Celtics team.
I have 2 questions. Do you think this season, are you done on the Celtics for this season? Yes or no?
To do what, I guess? Like, I still think they could make the Eastern Conference Finals if they get hot. And I don't know. I would be.
I don't even
done
think they can get that far, but
probably not. I'm done on the Celtics doing. I don't know.
Well, are you done? Are you done for this season? Yes or no? Do you think they can make the finals?
I'll say no. I literally, like, just 5 minutes ago said I'm selling all my stock on the Celtics, but I'm not officially done yet.
All right. And next question is their window over to get to the finals or to win a finals?
No.
It's not over?
I mean, Tatum is 24 and Brown's 25, right? Is that it? 23 and 24? They're not old. They're not even in their primes.
But
Tatum might be 22.
It's not even just them two, but it's the rest of the East, which for the next 2 years, the Nets are going to be the best team in the East. I don't think you can question that, because they'll still have all 3 of them. After that, who knows? Because definitely not all 3 of them are going to re-sign. But even though you have Tatum and Brown, unless you have a third star, I don't see how you can get farther, because Kemba's going to be here for another couple years, so you're going to be dragged down by that. You're still not picking in the top of the draft, which they had those picks before. They never really hit on them.
I mean, if all goes well as the Celtics, Tatum's the best player in a Nets versus Celtics series in 2 years. So, and Brown maybe is the 3rd or 4th, maybe even the 2nd. Well, I would assume KD is going to be better than Brown in 2 years, but I think Brown has potential to be better than Harden and Irving.
But again, you still have those two players. I just don't know what the rest of the team's going to look like because
I mean,
none of your last couple draft picks have hit, and it doesn't look like they're going to. And then you're still going to have Kemba on your team, so your cap situation is going to be tough, especially when you're paying Tatum and Brown. So
yeah, I still think this team has a window. I mean, the ceiling is the sky's the limit for Tatum and Brown still in my mind, and the team. Yeah, I mean, Kemba probably won't be ideal. He'll definitely be very overpaid on the Celtics in 2 years, but I still think you can make it work. I mean, the reality is with NBA draft picks, like after the 5th pick or whatever, after like the first 3, it's really just like, pin the tail on the donkey with that type of stuff. Like you either get lucky or you don't. And even if you do get lucky, unless you get super lucky, you're just getting somebody like a Luke Kennard or I don't know, a Peyton Pritchard or.
Well, I mean, you can get lucky with the 15th pick or whatever it was.
If you could get a Donovan Mitchell or a Devin Booker, like awesome. But I don't think you need to do that for this team to get to the finals and win a finals still.
I don't know. I feel
assuming
like
Tatum and Brown don't leave, then you're going to have these guys for a while. They won't hit 30 for like another 7 years. So I still think the window is wide open. Especially once LeBron leaves the league. If this team was in the West, I still think the West is better than the East, and I still don't think it's that close.
Yeah. Because the East at the top is better than the West. You could argue it's better, but the West as a whole is completely better because you have teams.
I wouldn't even disagree. I wouldn't even agree with that. I still think at the top, the West is far better than the East. I still think the Lakers and the Clippers right now. I could not see anybody else winning the finals other than the Lakers and the Clippers right now.
I would have Lakers then Nets, and it may even be depending on what AD is. It could be Nets first. I don't see I don't see the Clippers being better than the Nets because. Unless someone steps up or they make a trade. They're not better than the Nets right now.
I mean...
And it's not just because the Nets beat them. They're just not better than them.
Kawhi, if they're in a series, you can definitely argue Kawhi is the best player in that series. I mean, we'll see. Durant
I would say KD is. I think he's the second best player.
You can put Kawhi on any of those players you want. You can put him on Harden. George is still a great defender as well.
Kawhi's not as good defensively as he used to be, though.
I mean, he's not the defensive player.
And they're not that great of a defensive team. If you look at the ratings, they're not that great of a defensive team.
I think the Clippers can match up with the Nets pretty well.
I think it'd be a close series, but I think it'd be in 6 games. I think the Nets would win. Maybe, and then
I would
have
the Clippers in 6 probably.
I would have the Nets. I just don't see how. I don't think the Clippers are as good as the Nets right now. Even if Kawhi would have to play amazingly. He'd have to be the best player in the series for them to have a chance. In my eyes.
I mean, I think he would be.
Because I think KD is the best player in that series, then Kawhi, and then I think it goes Harden or Harden, Kyrie, and then Paul George. So
I don't know. I would still.
Harden on this team is different than he was on the Rockets. He's not shooting 25 shots a game anymore.
That doesn't mean that he's great defensively or that he's going to shoot. I mean, what's he shooting from 3?
Ever since he got to the Nets, he's shooting 41%.
I don't know. I still don't buy the Nets. I mean, not that I don't buy them as much as you do, I guess. I would still have the Clippers in that series. I still think, even if you want to say KD is the best player in that series, I would probably say right now that Kawhi would be the best player in that series. But I still think George is the 3rd best player. I would rather have George over Harden and Irving in that series.
No, I don't think so at all.
Definitely over Irving.
No,
definitely over Irving.
No. I think people are, and I'm not a big Kyrie fan, but he's one of the top 10 players in the NBA. There's no question.
There's definitely a question.
I don't think there is. The way that he can play, he could be a top 10 player in the league. He's better than Paul George is. There's no doubt.
No, I don't think so.
Yes, he is. Paul George, he's having a great year this year, but what we've seen in the past, if you've seen his closeout games in playoffs, he's never been good.
Yeah, but
he's never been good in closeout games. He's never even been good in the playoffs. Ever since the Heat Pacers series in 2013, he's never been good in the playoffs.
Yeah, but I still don't think it's to the point where I'm going to assume George is going to be bad in the playoffs. I still think we can see a very good Paul George
But even if George is good in the playoffs, if Kawhi and George are really good in that playoff series, I still don't see them beating the Nets. I just think that the 3, as long as their defense is somewhat good, somewhat good. They can outscore anyone. So as long as they can get stops when they need to.
I mean, they
it's
can,
not,
yeah. But
it's not like their defense needs to be amazing the entire time. As long as you can get stops when you need to for that team, they can outscore anyone. So why wouldn't they be able to beat the Clippers?
I mean, I'm not saying they wouldn't be able to. I would definitely still pick the Clippers, though. I mean, I still think Kawhi, George. I mean, they don't have a dominant big man or whatever, but they don't need that at all. I mean, not against DeAndre Jordan. Obviously, Pat Bev, Lou Will, Marcus Morris, Kennard. I still think this team's pretty good.
This is what the closing fives would be for each team. For the Nets, it'd be Harden, Kyrie, KD, Joe Harris, and Jeff Green. For the Clippers, it'd be George, Kawhi, Beverly, Marcus Morris, and Serge Ibaka.
I mean,
That'd be your closing five?
If you rank those 10 players, the Nets have the bottom two in my mind.
You think Harris and Green are bottom two?
Debatably, yeah.
No.
I mean, I definitely think Jeff Green is the bottom one, but by a solid margin.
He might be, but Harris is not the 9th best player of those 10.
Who would be then?
I think you could say Beverly or even Morris.
I mean,
they're not. What does Beverly do? He's good in quotations defensively. He's not great. He doesn't do anything
I still think
offensively.
that's pretty valuable.
But he doesn't do anything offensively.
I mean, in the closing minutes, I don't need Beverly. Obviously, I mean, having a 3-point shot, like, cool. But in the closing minutes, I don't need him to be taking any shots. Any shots. I mean, if you in the closing minutes of a game,
but
Kawhi and Paul George for me are fine enough.
The Clippers are the worst clutch team in the NBA. That's the last 5 minutes of a game in a 5-possession game or 5-point game. They're the worst team in the NBA.
In what, this year or just
this
in
year?
general?
They're the worst team in the NBA. This year they've been the worst team.
What is the stats?
It's clutch. I don't know if it's points or just clutch minutes or clutch whatever, but it's clutch something. And I know the clutch rating. I don't know what it is.
I don't know.
They're the worst team. I remember seeing that stat. I think it was even before last night, where they again really shouldn't have been in that game last night. Paul George brought him back in. I don't know why he was sitting at the end of the game, but they really had no shot of winning that game. Like, they shouldn't have even been in that game, is what I'm trying to say. But again, they kind of choked at the end of the game, even when Paul George brought them back in. So they're just not a good team down the clutch. Maybe that changes.
I wouldn't.
To be the worst team when you have one top 5 player, then George is probably a top 20 player. So that's concerning, especially when Marcus Morris gets the ball at the end of the game, he's shooting it, which is not the best thing. Beverly gets the ball. I don't want him shooting it, but he might. And then Ibaka, he doesn't. I'm not worried about Ibaka. At least I know he can hit a clutch shot. So I don't know. I just don't like that aspect of their team. That I think in a series against the Nets, they don't have the 2 best players. Even if they were to play their best, KD's still the best player in that series. And defensively, they're not that good defensively as people think they are. So. And they can't outscore the Nets.
They're definitely better than the Nets defensively.
They are, clearly. But they're not as good as you would think with players that are on their team.
I mean,
if you just look at the ratings, they're just.
Not that Patrick Beverly's going to make first team all defense or anything, but I mean, you've got at least Pat Bev to put on Irving.
He's not going to stop him though.
I mean, nobody's going to stop anybody on that Nets team necessarily, but it's all about if you just can limit them to not, indefinitely outscore you in every single game. You have Pat Bev for Irving. You could put George on. You could put either Kawhi or George on either one of those.
You put George on Harden and Kawhi
probably,
on the team.
Yeah. But I still, if both teams are hitting their shots, I mean, it's going to be tough to outscore the Nets. But we also, I don't know that you have anybody to put on Leonard, or I don't know that you have anybody to put on George. I still think the I still think the Clippers are the best team in that series. But in other news in the NBA, the Timberwolves dismissed Ryan Saunders, the son of Flip. To me, I know some people bought the Timberwolves. I definitely saw some people with their intentional hot takes of the season saying the Timberwolves will find a way to get into the playoffs. I never bought that. The West is so loaded. And, talk about, overrated players in my mind. First off, D'Angelo Russell, I don't buy him as, not even an all-star caliber player, especially in the West. To me, I don't think he's that. Cat, he hasn't. I knew that we knew this year wasn't going to be a career year for him. I mean, with all the stuff he talked about, before the start of the season and all that, I knew this team wasn't going to be good. Ryan Saunders, he was just set up for failure, and I don't even think he's probably a good coach anyways, but even if you have Pop down there, I'm not sure that this team, I don't know. I mean, I guess the Spurs are doing pretty well this year, but regardless of your coach, this team is not a good team. So.
Yeah, this team, they were 7-24 this year. They were whatever they were last year.
They were the worst. They had the worst record. They still have the worst record in the NBA right now, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. They're not a good team. And yeah, I agree with you. Like, some people were saying, like, this team could maybe make a playoffs. You have Cat, Russell, Malik Beasley, Anthony Edwards. Like, I think people get too caught up in names and not the fact that all those four players are terrible defensively, along with everyone else on their team, which is why they're 7-24. Yeah, I know they haven't played a lot of games together, but even if they were, they'd still be 7-24. Maybe they'd have like 2 more wins. They're just really bad defensively, and he was put up for failure. Basically, he got the job from when Thibodeau got fired. They basically just put him at head coach. I think it was basically because his dad was the head coach before. So, I think that's kind of the reason why. So, it's kind of whatever in my mind.
If you're the Timberwolves, clearly you're just hoping to get the number 1 pick again. I'm not sure who's ranked. I forget his name. Is this the Cade Cunningham draft?
Yeah.
So
which that would be. That's the guy.
Yeah.
Who they should take, because Russell, you could play him at the 2 or you could trade him. Honestly, if you get Cade Cunningham.
To me, your team in the future should be built around Edwards, Towns, and if you get Cunningham, then Cunningham. If not, whatever. Whoever you get out of the draft, it should be around those 3 players. You should not consider D'Angelo Russell a part of your championship core. If you have to deal him, you have to deal him. And I guess, if you have to deal Edwards, you wouldn't. Unless somebody's trading LeBron or whatever, but yeah. We'll move on to the NFL stuff, though. Timberwolves, whatever. Unless you have anything to say.
Well, before we move on, we're just going to take a quick ad break.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, did you just
totally forgot about that, but yeah. All right. We're back from the ad break. We'll just get into the NFL stuff. So for the NFL, we're going to go through all 32 teams, division by division. Basically just talk about their quarterback situation. Clearly the most important position in all of sports, probably.
So we'll start with the AFC East. Some of these are going to be really easy. Other ones we'll talk about. But the first one is the Bills, Josh Allen. We don't really have to say much about it. He's clearly their franchise quarterback after the year that he had this year.
Yeah.
So next team. So this will be an interesting one. The Dolphins. So they have Tua at quarterback. He didn't have a great rookie season. There's been talks of possibly getting Watson.
What would you give up for Watson if you're the Dolphins?
Well, I don't think you can look at any of the other quarterback trades so far in the Wentz or the Stafford and base it off that, because it's a completely different situation in that he's 25. He's at least top 5 quarterback, probably top 3, but at least top 5. And he's in a situation where he clearly wants to be traded. The team doesn't want to trade him. They're basically saying no to everyone who's asking about him. So what would I give up? You have to give up Tua. You'd have to give up your draft pick this year, which was the Texans. That's the 3rd pick this year. And probably 2 more first-round picks. And probably a 3rd or 4th, probably down the road too.
Would you do Tua, they have 2 first round. What's their other first round pick? 17?
Yeah, it's like 17.
Okay, so would you give up Tua, 3, 17, next year's first, and a 2022 4th?
I don't know. I don't know about the 17th this year, because they still need holes to fill in that roster.
They do.
So unless you think that if you just add Watson, they were 10-6 last year with Tua and Fitzpatrick. If you think that Watson, you could put him in and you could be 11-5 or 12-4, which they could do considering they were 10-6, I would do it. But I still think they have a lot of holes to fill on that team.
No, I would agree. I think with Watson, you actually stay at 10-6, maybe get 11-5. The schedule's going to be a little bit harder for the AFC East this year. I don't think their records are going to be just as great, especially the Dolphins. They're now playing a second-place schedule. I don't buy them. Like, if they were to come into this year with last year's roster exactly the same, they're not going to go 10-6 in my mind. And I view Brian Flores as a very, 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 very good coach in this league right now. If you get Watson, though, I think that, again, like that brings you from a team that would compete for a playoff spot and get bounced in the first round to being able to actually win playoff games. So would I do the trade? It's really tough because you're right, there's so many holes to fill. But I think I would do it. If it was that or bust, I would do it. I mean, I think you have to. If you don't do this trade, and the reason you can't win any playoff games is because you're stuck with no quarterback, that's not good.
Yeah, and I think they would probably want to do the trade, but I don't know if the Texans.
I don't know if the Texans
would
do it either.
Yeah,
I think the reason that trade would not happen is because of the Texans.
Yeah. Next team, the Patriots. So, I mean, technically they don't have a quarterback right now because Cam, they're not going to bring him back, and unless you think Jarrett Stidham's the quarterback. I think
there's a chance he does come back, but I would not want that.
Yeah, I wouldn't want that either. And I mean, he just can't throw the ball. That's really it.
He's old. He's done.
Yeah.
Now, what do you do if you're the Patriots? I think, best case is probably Jimmy G, but that means the Niners either got Watson. It means they probably, at this point in the offseason, they must have had to have gotten Watson if they don't have Jimmy G.
Yeah.
I think Jimmy G can be solid enough. We've clearly seen him work in New England. Belichick. I mean, I don't know if you've heard. I mean, it's more from being a local or whatever, but if you just go back and you listen to Garoppolo or Belichick talk about Garoppolo, it's like borderline disgusting how much he loves Garoppolo. I think that would work very well. I think with Garoppolo, and you get a couple of these opt-out guys back and that are pretty solid, like a Hightower and a Chung. Maybe you hit on a couple picks as well. J.C. Jackson, maybe he emerges into an actual Pro Bowl cornerback. He's definitely overrated last year, but I think this team could make a wild card spot, 100%. I know that you may not like that take, but I still have Belichick as the best coach in the league. I've never loved Belichick as a GM, but as far as the quarterback position is concerned, yes, Garoppolo, I think that's the best. If not, whatever you can really, it's just we have to. It's too early to tell. It's just too early to tell.
Yeah.
Clearly, you have to draft somebody, obviously, as well. But I think that goes without saying. You draft whoever Belichick likes. I'm not going to put any time into it. Whoever he likes is the guy you go with. I mean.
Yeah, I would say Garoppolo or maybe a draft pick. Honestly, that's really the two options I see. Then the Jets. So they still technically have Sam Darnold. I mean, he is under contract to be on their team. I mean,
I think people are selling on Sam Darnold way too hard right now.
Yeah, I think we're kind of pro Sam Darnold, I would say. Not like super high, but I think we both see the upside in him being on a good team with a good offensive line or at least weapons.
Yeah, I mean, if he has a competent roster on him, he will be a top 15 quarterback. I have absolutely no doubt in my mind.
I think so too.
And I know he's pretty interception prone. He's been that even since USC, but I don't think that's too much of a problem. I think that is much less of a problem when you have a competent roster and at least a semi-competent coach with you. If Saul is that, they hit on a few draft picks. This team can. I mean, they're not going to do well next year. I think their best case is probably 7-9. Like their absolute best case is probably 7-9.
Yeah.
But again, if you go 7-9, 6-10, and you look promising, and Darnold actually looks like he's a quarterback you can roll with in the future, I think you go with it. It's tough if you're the Jets, only because you've had no success with Darnold, and he hasn't looked the best, and you're going to go another year with probably best case 7-9. That's going to be rough. Even if Darnold does play like decently well.
Yeah.
There are going to be Jets fans that don't want him there next year because, wow, they went 7-9 again. But, I mean, unless he's a top 8 quarterback in the league, which I don't see happening at all with whatever is around him, they're not going to be better than 7-9.
Yeah, I feel like they're going to trade Darnold and pick Zach Wilson with the number 2 pick.
Would you do that? I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, if you're getting stuff for Darnold.
Well, one thing is that financially, it just prolongs your rebuild because you don't have to pay Wilson for 4 or 5 years, while Darnold will be coming up in the next 2 years, and he's making more money right now than Wilson would be. So that's one thing. Even if you like, I feel like, if you're taking Wilson with the number 2 pick, it's not just because of the money. You clearly have to like him. You're not just going to take a guy with the number 2 pick like that. But I feel like they're probably going to do that. I don't know. I feel like Sam's done in New York.
I think for Sam, that's best.
I think it is best for him. Well, what team would he go to? I don't know. But, I think for him, the best situation would be to get out of New York. I think that'd be the best.
I don't know if the Bears are into Darnold or not, but
well, they might be. I mean, they missed out on Wentz. The Colts have their guy, the Rams have their guy. I mean, the Steelers, who knows what's going to happen with them? So the Bears could definitely be a possibility for Sam.
I think I don't know what I would want to happen. I think as an AFC East person, I don't want Sam Darnold in my division. Maybe I don't know if the Jets are ever even going to work out regardless of their quarterback, anyways. But
yeah.
I mean, if they, I don't know what you would get for Darnold, but if you can get a first out of Stafford and Wentz, I think you could get close to it for Darnold.
I still think those are different situations, though.
I know, I would too. I do too. I definitely think they're different situations, but I still think you should be able to get a first out of Darnold if you're going to trade him. And I don't know if you do, but I think you should get a first.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to trade Darnold if I don't get a first. At least a second. At least a high second.
Yeah, at least a second. Definitely at least a second. But I guess that's kind of it for the Jets. We're going to AFC North. This division's pretty easy, honestly, except for the Steelers. But the Ravens, I mean, they have Lamar. I mean, no matter what you say about him, he is their quarterback.
He's their quarterback. So. I don't love him, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't love him. He still hasn't shown in the playoffs, even though he beat the Titans. That Titans team was not that good.
Is he a quarterback that can take you to a Super Bowl? In my opinion, no.
Yeah, no, I don't think he can. Unless he shows the ability to throw the ball consistently down the field, but also accurately. Until then, no, he just can't. He's too one-dimensional.
I would agree, and I don't like the attitude of this Ravens team at all either. And that I think that contributes to Lamar.
Yeah,
a little bit too cocky for me. And I think last year they talked about how they were humbled or whatever, but. Yeah, I don't buy it.
I don't buy it either. But he is going to be their quarterback for the next season. Bengals, Joe Burrow. I mean, obviously he's going to be the quarterback. I don't know when he's coming back, but
probably midway through next year. If you're the Bengals, you could arguably just sit him out next year as well. Just whatever. It's such a horrible situation to see Burrow tear his ACL for the Bengals. I mean, you obviously don't want to see that regardless, but. That's so precious, just burning years on your number 1 pick's rookie contract like that, because assuming Burrow is what he was in his rookie year and continues to get better, he's going to get paid a lot of money, and you're going to miss out on years where you could have built your roster around Burrow. Again, I mean, like we talked about, the rookie contract on a quarterback is the most valuable thing in maybe all of sports.
Definitely all of sports, yeah.
So...
And they're a cheap team anyways, so they would pay Burrow, but they're not going to pay anyone else. That's just what the Bengals do. They don't really pay anyone, so it's having those rookie years would have been big. Now, would they have won like a playoff game? Probably not, but it would have been at least you would have had the possibility of getting to the playoffs on his rookie contract. Next team, the Browns. Baker, kind of the same situation as Lamar almost, where. He's your quarterback, but is he like your franchise quarterback and a guy who can lead you to multiple playoff wins? I don't know. Maybe.
I like Baker, but I feel like I'm slightly biased. Like I just for some reason feel like I like Baker more than I should. He hasn't proven anything. I don't think that a playoff win against the Steelers, it proves that, at least you can win a game, but you have to get lucky to get an opponent like the Steelers 2 years in a row.
Yeah.
You're going to be playing a more difficult schedule as well. I think for now, I mean, we both agree he's the move for now. Is he the move in the future? Who knows?
It will be interesting to see what his contract looks like, because they're most likely going to franchise him whenever that has probably after next year. But
he might be another case of double franchise and move on.
Yeah, because in the system that they have right now, where it's basically run the ball and then play action and make throws when he has to, he works. But if you're asking him to do more than that, he can't really do that.
No matter what,
that's what you need your franchise quarterback to be able to do.
Even if that is your offense is run, work off the play action. Mayfield can make the throws, roll out when he has to. No matter what, to win a Super Bowl, you need to make in one of any of these 19 games or 18 games that you'll play, or 20 games or whatever, you will have to make the throw or make at least a couple of those type of throws. I mean, Brady had to do it. Garoppolo had to do it. He didn't do it. It has to happen, and the question is, do you trust Mayfield to be in that situation? And even then, you have to have a very good roster around you and a very good coach, which I think right now you look like you do. But again, like that's the case for Mayfield. And I don't even know if he can be the one that makes that throw to Saunders, or I don't know if he can be the one that makes that throw to Gronk down the sideline. Who knows? But for now, I mean, we both agree. So.
Yeah. And then last team, the Steelers. So it's, it's Big Ben, but he technically, I think the GM, or if it was their owner, whoever it was, they weren't really committed to him. I think it was only a couple of days ago that someone asked him about it. I would assume he comes back for one more year, but who knows? I mean, he may retire. They may just get Darnold or something like that. So it's not really sure what's going on there.
Who knows? Big Ben's back for another year. You'd assume you need to have a backup plan. So it has to be out of the draft, definitely. I wouldn't. This is the thing with the Steelers and what I've seen with the Patriots and what I want with the Patriots. If you're in a situation where you have this quarterback like Ben, who you know is on the outs after a year at best, honestly, you need to have a backup plan. You saw the same thing with Brady, and Garoppolo was that backup plan. Obviously, Brady out-aged and outplayed Jimmy G. But you need to have that backup plan. If a year from now the Steelers don't have their guy, or at least who they think is their guy out of the draft, that is not good.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not good.
So whether that's this year or next year, whenever they draft someone, they're going to have to draft someone. They probably should do it this year, but
definitely should do it
unless they think that they can somewhat compete for a Super Bowl, which I don't think they can, they should probably draft a quarterback this year. All right, AFC South. We'll start with the Texans. I mean, Deshaun Watson is their quarterback.
Do you think he gets traded?
I don't know. I think what I've seen and what I've heard is that teams have called for him, and the Texans said no. They haven't even talked about anything. They've basically just said no. But also, they can't even talk to Deshaun. He isn't answering any of their calls. So is he going to hold out? I mean, I'd be surprised if he holds out for a whole season. He's 25 years old. Just miss a whole season as a quarterback? I don't know when that's even ever been done. So I would be surprised if he held out the entire year. But would they even want to trade him? It's a crazy situation that if they can't figure it out before the season starts, I think they almost have to trade him because he's not going to play then.
Everybody, from anything I've watched in the media, said that Watson's 100% getting traded, and I think that's very aggressive. I think there's a chance he doesn't, but
yeah.
I think if you held a gun to my head and say pick, I think I would probably say he does get traded. But I don't know. It's so tough because, again, you're going to have to find a team that's willing to give up so much. At the bare minimum, a quarterback and 3 firsts. At the bare minimum.
I feel like there's teams that would do that.
There are teams that would give up a quarterback and 3 firsts. That's even at the very bare minimum. I mean, that's all the leverage in the world working against the Texans. That's the bare minimum. And I still think if you're the Texans, I think there's still an argument to be made, even if Deshaun Watson wants to sit, that you ride it out, and at some point you have to bet he's not going to sit out the whole regular season and lose out on basically $30-40 million.
Yeah, however much he's supposed to get paid.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. If I'm the Texans, obviously I want to keep Watson, but I think I would trade him. Clearly if Watson's going to be like this, I would definitely just trade him. We'll see what happens, but
it seems like if they're going to trade him, it's going to be on draft day. That's probably what it seems like. Because once that passes, I mean, it's going to be hard to trade because you don't know where everyone's set for the order next year. You don't know what if the Dolphins. I mean, they have that 3rd pick, which was yours. It's a valuable pick. So
Nick Caserio, though, Caserio, all these other guys, you have to start picking up the phone and answering these calls, though. These can't be no. You got to at some point consider because like you said, the draft, you're not trading them after the draft, and if you are, it's for pennies on the dollar, 70 cents on the dollar, whatever.
Yeah.
And I just, yeah, you have to start at least considering these trades.
Yeah. Next team, the Colts. I mean, they just traded for Carson Wentz. He's going to be their guy. Nothing much really else to say about it.
I think Orlovsky said he was a dark horse MVP. Wentz, I wouldn't disagree.
I think he could be. I think he definitely could be.
I think he's a top 10 quarterback. I think if you consider Tannehill a top 10 quarterback, which people do, Wentz will be better than Tannehill. No doubt in my mind.
Yeah. I mean, like, talent-wise, clearly, it's clearly the system in that Tennessee offense is what makes him, the stats look really good. But for Wentz, I mean, you have to look at last season and be like, was that just the situation was just so bad that he was just playing so bad, or was he really playing that bad? And that even if he's on a better team, better coaching, better offensive line, better weapons, to a point, is he going to be a top 12 guy? Can he take that jump from being? I mean, he was honestly the worst quarterback last year in the NFL. If you look at the stats and you look at how he played, he was arguably the worst quarterback in the NFL last year. So can he be a top 12 quarterback with the Colts? You'd like to say yes because of the team they have, and him just getting out of Philadelphia. I don't know. I think he can.
I think that
means
a lot getting out of Philly.
I think it does too. I don't think, and he's also, there was always those reports of him not being able to get along with guys in the locker room and everything like that. I don't know if those were true or not, but they definitely somewhat had to be true, right? Because the situation was so bad. So maybe just getting out of there is the best thing. No matter what team he was going to, he could be better. But, yeah, I mean, he's obviously going to be their quarterback for next year.
Yeah. I mean, for Wentz, getting out of a scenario where obviously Foles basically just ruined his career in Philadelphia. And that's not the sole reason, but that's a very big reason why everything happened. And getting into a place where all 52 other players on the roster are ecstatic about their year, and they now have a guy to get behind and root for. Definitely more so than Phillip Rivers, because this guy's here for basically ever. If you're a Colts player, that's what you're thinking, and you have a chance to win the Super Bowl, and this is your guy now. And Wentz having that backing, I think that means a lot for him. I think there are other quarterbacks that are different. Like Brady, when he's faced with doubt and stuff, he'll get through it. I don't know that Wentz is that guy, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. But yeah, I think he's a dark horse MVP.
Yeah. Next team, the Jaguars. I mean, obviously they're going to pick Trevor Lawrence in the draft, so nothing much to say really. But I guess you hope that he'll be there for 15 years.
Yeah, I mean, you can move on.
Yeah. Then last team for the AFC South is the Titans. I mean, they have Ryan Tannehill. He signed that contract. He is going to be their quarterback for probably the rest of that contract. Like we kind of just said earlier, his stats would tell you he's like a top 10 quarterback, but if you look at him, he's not, just because he doesn't have all the characteristics and talent that a top 10 quarterback would have. It's just the system, having Henry. It would be interesting to see if Henry has a bad year this year or he gets injured, and then what happens with Tannehill and the Titans. I think they're barely a playoff team anyways, so if Henry's having a bad year, they're most likely not going to be a playoff team. But again,
Henry had to have the 5th most rushing yards in NFL history for this team to squeeze into the playoffs.
Yeah. And that that can be credited to their defense being really bad, which it was, but still, that's for him to have 2,000 yards and your quarterback put up a year like he did and still barely make the playoffs, that's not. And he's not going to be able to put up 2,000 yards every single season. So
at some point, Henry's falling off. Tannehill's signed through 2023, so he'll be a free agent in 2024. That's the cap to me on this Henry Tannehill era. I don't believe it in getting you to another AFC Championship game. Maybe you do if you're super lucky, but I don't think so. You're not winning a Super Bowl with this team, in my opinion, with Tannehill as your quarterback. I think, in his best case, with the system around him, with Henry, with all this stuff, maybe he can look like a top 10, but I still don't even think he has looked like a top 10. I don't think he will look like a top 10. I think he's mediocre. I still think he's closer to Dolphins Tannehill, which was better than people gave him credit for. I don't think he was like a bottom 28, 29 quarterback. I don't think he was 3rd worst in the league, but I think he's closer to being the 23rd best quarterback in the league than I think he is being the 8th best quarterback in the league.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we'll see. He's probably going to ride out the rest of this contract. I don't think it's going to get him anywhere. I think Henry's wasting, his potential. We could talk about that in a different episode, but I don't think this team's getting it going anywhere, special. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and then last division, AFC West. We'll start with the Broncos. They have Drew Lock as their quarterback. I would say this is his last year. Unless he's a really good year, this is like his prove-it year. So, and I don't see him getting much better. So they'll probably be drafting a quarterback next year. Maybe they even trade for Watson, or they just get someone in free agency, like a bridge quarterback, until they can get their quarterback.
You'd like to draft a third or fourth rounder this year if you like somebody there.
I feel like they've been doing that too much, though. Ever since Manning left, they've been trying to do that, though.
I mean, Paxton Lynch was a first rounder.
Yeah, but they jumped up to get him, and they got him at the end of the first round. He shouldn't have been a first-round quarterback, and he's not even in the league anymore.
Even if it doesn't work out, I'm fine with wasting a third or fourth rounder to at least push Lock and at least have some potential there behind Lock, have something there, kind of like a Hurts, but you don't have to make him a second rounder. If you want to have it in the fourth round, sure. I'd like to draft somebody there, Worst case, both of them don't work out, but at least you have a plan. I think it's worth that pick in that spot. So,
but they have to at least do something soon.
Yeah, because Locke isn't even like his last year. He could have he has 3 games. Like he doesn't have a full season.
Yeah,
if he plays a bad 3 games, he might get benched.
Yeah. The Chiefs. I mean, obviously Mahomes. We don't really have to talk about that. The Raiders. They have Derek Carr. It seems like they don't really want him to be the quarterback, but it seems like he probably is going to be the quarterback. Doesn't seem like he's going to get traded
now.
For
a team that has been as uncontent with the quarterback as there has been, they have been involved in no moves, no quarterback rumors even. Surprising.
And I mean, they have Mariota on their bench, who it seems like they really like, but if you can't get rid of Carr, then how is Mariota going to start? Maybe it's a weird situation with that. You would think that they'd make a move, but especially when it's been reported that they don't really like Carr at quarterback. So I don't know what they're thinking.
It would surprise me if teams didn't want to give up anything for Carr. Honestly, maybe it's because they know that the Raiders have no leverage.
Yeah,
I'm not exactly sure what it is. You would have thought the same thing about the Lions, too. I mean, they don't have any leverage, really, with Stafford either. But, I don't know. I definitely prefer Carr over Mariota from what we've seen. I know Mariota had a good game, basically. But I don't trust Mariota. I don't trust that as your sole plan. I still think Carr is a better quarterback than Mariota. I still think Carr is a better quarterback than even Tannehill. I like Carr more than Tannehill.
I think he can be. He definitely has more talent. But I mean, they're kind of similar if you really look at them.
I think they're pretty similar, but yeah, I mean, I would give the talent edge to slightly, but definitely to Carr.
Yeah,
I still think in a situation, Carr might be the difference between making that throw to Sanders in the Super Bowl and not. And not that those teams are getting to a Super Bowl, but in terms of their gap.
Yeah, and then last team for the AFC is the Chargers. They have Justin Herbert. He's going to be the quarterback for the next 10 years, 15 years, whatever it is. So.
Yeah. Let's take another ad break before we get into the NFC. We'll be back in a second.
All right, we're back from the ad break. We're going to start with the NFC now. So NFC East, we have the Cowboys with Dak Prescott. I mean, technically he's a free agent, but I would assume that he is coming back. Whether he's getting tagged again or he's getting a long-term contract, I'd assume he's coming back.
I mean, as a Cowboys fan, is that what you want?
Yeah, I mean, look, if he gets tagged, he's probably not coming back the next year, and I think he is a top 15. He's definitely a top 15 quarterback. There's no doubt. He's probably even top 12. You have to just look at the list, but he probably is top 12.
I would definitely agree he's top 12.
Yeah. And I don't think this injury is going to affect him that much. It was a clean break. It was a break, no ligaments, nothing like that. So I think he'll be fine coming back for the season. And I think he's improved every single year. I mean, maybe 2017 he was bad from his rookie year, but he's improved basically every single year. And as long as their team as a whole is better, then I think his play is going to improve the team even more. So I think he's coming back. And
one thing quickly before we move on is the only thing that scares me is you couldn't build a Super Bowl team when he was on his rookie contract, and you do it when he's paid, we'll just say $30 million a year. I'm not too sure, but I think you can. I still think that he can get better from when he was in his rookie contract. I think he probably is going to be better. I think he can. I think he has potential to be a top 8 quarterback, 100%. So.
Yeah. The next team, the Giants. I mean, they have Daniel Jones. He's going to be the quarterback for this year, but this is his prove-it year. If he's not improved or better, you have to look at other options, whether it's free agency or the draft.
100%. This is his last year.
Yeah, and he has to stay healthy, and he has to be a better thrower of the ball. That's the two things. If he can improve on that, he'll probably stay for at least one more year, but he has to improve on that.
They have to at least compete for the division.
Yeah.
They got to go at least 8-8. And even then, I mean, if he doesn't look great, he has to look like a top 15 guy. If he's not, you move on.
Yeah. Next team, the Eagles. I mean, obviously they traded Wentz. It looks like Hurts is going to be the starter. I think they said they're trying to have people compete for him in training camp, but it looks like he's going to be the starter. I'm not sold on him at all. No, I don't think anyone is. I don't even know really what to think about him as a quarterback. But
I don't think the Eagles are. So
yeah, I don't think they really are either.
They may draft somebody who knows. I don't believe in Hurts. I don't think he's a capable enough thrower in this league to get it done. So, I mean, do whatever you want this year. I still think your plan is another guy in the draft. So
yeah, and they're looking at a rebuild with the old pieces that they have and the money they've tied up. They're looking for a rebuild anyway, so maybe he's that guy, maybe he's not, but we'll have to see. And then Washington. I mean, is their quarter? I don't think Alex Smith is going to be the quarterback. I think he's done. I think he should just retire. He had a good year last year, but he can't move in the pocket. I think he should just retire. They signed Taylor Heineke back. Maybe he's their quarterback. I don't know.
I don't think so. I don't even know. I think that contract is so based off of the fans.
Yeah.
Almost like a meme to a certain. I don't think he's a quarterback of the future. I would agree on Smith retiring. What possible way could he have a better year than what he had last year, considering the comeback player of the year, all that stuff?
And at the end of the year, once he got re-injured, he was completely immobile after he was already basically immobile. So he should just retire at the comeback player of the year, a really good year. He should retire. NFC North, we'll start with the Bears. I mean, Mitch Trubisky, he's not coming back as their quarterback. Do they trade for Watson? Do they trade for Darnold? Do they maybe draft someone? Is he going to be their quarterback for next year? They have a lot of questions at quarterback.
The Bears, this is right.
Yeah, the Bears.
Trubisky, please don't. I just don't. I wouldn't want Foles either. I would say draft. I'm just not too sure. I don't want to have to do another year with Trubisky, though. I mean, this whole roster is on the outs. I'd like to find somebody that can actually bring them to a Super Bowl. And maybe even if Trubisky isn't horrible, I still don't care. You need somebody that has potential in the next 2 years, whether that's out of the draft, out of free agency, out of a trade. Yeah. The
only problem with their situation is that Nagy and Ryan Pace, their head coach and GM, are most likely getting fired, whether it's mid-season or at the end of the season. So whoever quarterback they bring in, it's he's going to have an amazing year. They're going to have to make the playoffs for them to have a successful season. So it's going to be a tough situation for any quarterback.
The NFC North is tough. I mean,
yeah, it's going to be somewhat tough this year.
You'd expect the Vikings to rebound. I think they're a playoff contender, just like they basically are every year. They're basically a playoff.
Yeah, they're always 500 or something like that.
The Packers are. I mean, they're going to win that division probably.
And the Lions, they'll probably be pretty bad. But
they're going to be bad, but they play
tough.
They play tough games. I mean, yeah. They'll at least have you maybe for the first few quarters until they decide to let you score 2 touchdowns at the end and drop a touchdown in the end zone to win the game. But
and then, speaking of the Lions, obviously they traded Stafford. They got Goff in return. We'll see what happens with the rest of his career.
Goff's your bridge. He's your bridge guy. I think it's just as simple as that. You now have the ability to pick and choose when you want to draft a quarterback. If you love a guy from this year, you can feel free to do that. If not, you can wait until next year and just continue to build that roster. You have no excuse to not have a loaded roster by the time your next quarterback comes in.
Yeah, because you can ride his contract out, or even the year before it ends, you can get rid of him, and you'll build your rest of your players up, and then you get your quarterback on their rookie contract for 5 years. That's the perfect situation for them.
You should basically have what happened to the Chiefs. You're not going to draft a Mahomes. Obviously, not only one team's ever done that, and that's the Chiefs. But
someone who can be a top 5 quarterback in the league. That's what you need.
You need to have a very competent quarterback, which Goff is competent enough. Draft your quarterback, have him sit there, or whatever. Your roster will now be a Super Bowl roster when you insert your quarterback of the future.
Yeah. Packers, Aaron Rodgers, he's still going to be there for a couple years.
Rodgers then Love. I mean, that's just the...
Yeah. He's going to ride his contract out, and then I'd assume they'd probably just go to Love. I would just think that at the end of this contract, it'd be tough for him to keep being the starting quarterback of the Packers, unless he's MVP in his last season or something like that. But yeah, that's it for the Packers. Last team in the North, the Vikings. I mean, they have Kirk Cousins. It's he's going to be their quarterback. What happens in the next couple years? Who knows? He's kind of like a middle of the pack quarterback. He can be good at other times. He can be really bad at other times though too.
He can be 11 or 12 best ish. He can be around that, or he can be 20th, 21st best, or typically he'll be 15th or 16th.
Yeah.
You need a loaded roster to have him win a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. NFC South. So this is a pretty interesting division, I would say, except for the Bucks. So you have the Falcons. They have Matt Ryan. It looks like he is going to be the quarterback for this year, unless they take Justin Fields. I think they have the 5th pick.
Even if they do, there's nothing saying Fields can't ride the bench for a year.
Yeah, and he probably would. I would just, I wouldn't assume they'd get rid of Matt Ryan for Fields this year. I would rather have him sit for a year behind Matt Ryan and then be the starting quarterback. That'd be a good transition. Now, do they do that? I don't know. They have to be in love with Fields, which who knows? It's still like a couple months away.
I mean, he's fallen already down the draft.
Yeah, it seems like Wilson's jumped and Fields has fallen. So does he fall to 5 or does he fall to 15? Who knows? It depends on what teams are in love with him. But I think that'd be a good transition for them. But again, they have to see what they do. Next team, the Panthers. So they have Teddy Bridgewater. It was clearly a bridge quarterback to whatever quarterback they're going to take in the future. I wouldn't expect that to be this year, maybe not even next year, but it's going to be soon. So, he's going to be the quarterback for...
You saw the rumors. They're trying to build up for a Watson trade. Maybe I don't foresee that happening. But if you could get him for... I mean, they were saying even like 3 firsts and McCaffrey, which is a lot. But for a guy like Watson, it's borderline priceless to get a guy like that. So...
Yeah.
I mean, especially from an owner perspective, like get a guy like that, your franchise instantly rises up $200 million and it's worth. I mean,
yeah, that'd be a good move for them if they could do it. But I'd still see them probably just using Teddy as a bridge quarterback to a future quarterback.
Yeah,
but
I would agree.
Yeah, and then the Saints. So nothing's come out really about if he's going to retire, Drew Brees, if he's going to retire or not. It seemed like he was going to, but nothing's come out yet.
I don't understand. It makes me think that he's at least, going back and thinking about it again.
Yeah.
Maybe just to double check to 100% make sure before he announces it. Maybe he does come back for another year. If you're the Saints, you may just want to rip off the Band-Aid. The only reason you wouldn't is if you're like, we have absolutely no plan at quarterback, so I guess we just have to take Breeze back for another year. You have to draft a guy in the draft this year, I think. There's just no... I don't think Taysom Hill's your guy. I think most people would agree on that at this point. I don't think Taysom Hill's your guy. Winston, clearly not the guy. If he can't even be the back quarterback and he can't beat out Taysom Hill, you've got problems. So you draft a guy. If Breeze is back, cool. If not, you look to a bridge type of quarterback. I don't know who that would be. Maybe a Dalton, maybe a Winston, maybe a Hill. But,
Yeah, if he comes back, he comes back. If not, you have to at least draft someone.
I think you have to regardless.
Yeah. And then the Bucks. I mean, they have Tom Brady. At least for next year, he's under contract. We'll see about after that, but he'll be their quarterback.
It'll be interesting to see if they draft a guy because that's what he does. That's what Brady kind of didn't want in New England, was to have that guy behind him. And I think Garoppolo was probably arguably the best pick Belichick ever had because it motivated Brady, but as Brady's gotten older, he's not wanted that for some reason. He's wanted like the respect and all that type of whatever you want to call it. But it would be interesting to see what happens if the Bucks draft another quarterback.
I would say at this point, like, he's 43, so I think you would have to. But when he was 37 and they tried to get Garoppolo in there, it was you would think that he would have fallen off, but he didn't. But I mean, at 43, he's not going to play for another 5 years.
No, 100%. But I'm just from Brady's perspective, he didn't want that.
Yeah, no, but I think he realizes now, like,
hopefully
he's he's not going to be this level for another 5 years. But yeah, again, that was a pretty easy one. And then last division, NFC West. So Cardinals, Kyler Murray. He's a top. He's the top 10 quarterback, and he has the ability to be a top 5. But their head coach has to change for that to happen. But yeah, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Then the Rams, like I said, they traded Goff. They got Stafford. I think that was the right move for them to do. And your hope is that you can get to the Super Bowl with Stafford and then win one with him.
Yeah, I mean, you have to. You have 2 years probably at most.
Yeah, you probably have 2 years until that roster, till the money starts building up with Donald and Ramsey and Stafford, and the dead cap hit that you would have taken from Goff too. And then the Niners. I mean, they have Jimmy G right now. Are they going to trade him? They're going to get Watson. They're going to draft someone. They're also a team with a lot of questions.
I'm a Jimmy G guy. I know some people aren't. I still think you can win a Super Bowl with him. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not too sure, but I still think he's a guy that you can get you there and gives you a chance to win playoff games. There's not a better option out there right now other than Watson, probably. So. Yeah,
if they can get Watson, they should definitely get him. But if they have to run it back with Jimmy G, I guess they have to. But you definitely would.
They're 20-6 with Jimmy G or something like that.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't think we're at the point where we need to get rid of Jimmy G. I mean, if you want to draft a guy, you feel free, but you should not spend a first rounder on a quarterback. Definitely not.
No.
If you want to spend a second rounder on a quarterback that you really like and think has potential, I wouldn't hate the pick.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I still think Jimmy G's plenty capable for this year.
Yeah. And then the last team, Seahawks, Russell Wilson. I mean, there was reports he wanted out. I mean, that's clearly not true. So yeah, he'll be the quarterback for the next 7 years, however long he's going to play for. So
yeah,
that was basically all the quarterbacks. Every team. There's the interesting ones like the Bears, the Jets, the Texans, the Dolphins, the Niners, and then there's the easy ones. The Chiefs, the Bucks, stuff like that. But we've already seen 2 trades so far with the Wentz and Stafford. We may see more. We may see other stuff, retiring, drafting quarterbacks. So we'll see. This will be, like we said before on previous episode, this will be the most interesting offseason that we've ever seen, especially for quarterback-wise.
Yeah.
So we'll just have to see what happens.
Yeah, but that's basically it. Appreciate everybody on the YouTube side / Spotify side or the WQAQ radio side. Whichever one you're on, feel free to check out the other. I mean, pretty simple stuff. But yeah, we'll be back, at least for the YouTube and Spotify side. Subscribe, follow, or whatever. We'll be back Friday at noon.